Vlad Tepes, or Vlad the Impaler, is one of history's most murderous figures, and the inspiration for Count Dracula. The Romanian prince was behind countless acts of unspeakable barbarity and ruthlessness. His favorite method of murder was impalement, in which victims were lowered onto sharpened stakes, suffering an agonizing death as their weight pulled them down. Vlad was born in late 1431. His father, also Vlad, was military governor of Transylvania and belonged to the Order of the Dragon, a band of knights whose duties included crusading against Turks. Vlad Sr. was given the surname Dracul because it means dragon in Romanian. Dracula is a diminutive form. At 11, the young Vlad was seized by Turks and spent 6 years in captivity in Turkey, during which time he grew into a monster without compassion. While he was away, his father was overthrown as prince of the Romanian province of Wallachia and murdered, along with Vlad's older brother. At 25, Vlad killed his father's murderer, Vladislav II, and seized power. Thus began a 6-year reign of terror. Vlad took revenge on those who helped topple his father by impaling the older ones and forcing the younger ones to march 50 miles to another town. There, they were made to build him a fortress, and many died in the process. Vlad was a law and order fanatic. Petty criminals were impaled. Merchants who flouted trade laws were impaled. Pretty much anybody Vlad disliked was impaled. He considered all poor people thieves. Once he invited a crowd of them to a feast at his court in Târgoviște. When they had finished, he had the hall locked and burned to the ground with them inside, saying they were scourgers. On another occasion, he is said to have rounded up peasants and driven them off a cliff, beneath which he had placed row upon row of sharpened stakes. Once, 2 Turkish ambassadors came to his court. Asked to remove their turbans, they refused on religious grounds, so Vlad got his guards to nail them to the screaming Turks' skulls. Vlad had a particular hatred for Germans, and many of his worst atrocities are depicted in German propaganda printed on the newly invented press. One shows Vlad's most appalling act of savagery, which came in 1462 as his heavily outnumbered army fled through Romania from Turkish invaders. Along the way, Vlad torched his own villages and poisoned wells so the chasing Turks had nothing to eat or drink. At Târgoviște, he impaled 20,000 Turkish prisoners and ate as he watched them die. The Turkish soldiers who found the forest of the impaled were so distraught they gave up the chase and went home. Vlad was assassinated in 1476, but 400 years on his bloodthirsty deeds provided the inspiration for Dracula, a fictional character literally thirsty for blood. The ghoul first appeared in the 1897 novel Dracula by Irish writer Bram Stoker. The history of Vlad Dracula is surrounded by myth and legend, so much so that nobody is too sure of what's what. We do know that he was the character that was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula, being the famous Count Dracula. The book brought about the vampires that are well known to this day and made Vlad the Impaler a famous character from history. Vlad the Impaler, Tepes, pronounced Țepeș, was born in the town of Sighișoara in Transylvania, now known as northern Romania, in 1431, and later ruled the area of southern Romania known as Wallachia. His father was Vlad Dracul and was a knight in the Order of the Dragon, a union of Central and Eastern European rulers who were a tad worried about the rising Ottoman Empire. The Order of the Dragon's coat of arms was a dragon and a cross. Vlad Dracul bore this coat of arms on everything, flags, coins, and his seal. It attracted the nickname of Dracul, probably coming from the story of the evil dragon in St. George, and the dragon, Dracul, meaning devil in Romanian. The second son born to Vlad Dracul was Vlad II. Therefore, the name developed an A representing the son of Dracula, the son of the devil. The word tepes in Romanian means impaler. Vlad was so named because of his cruel and gruesome habit of impaling people and leaving them to rot in the sun as a means of punishing his enemies. Vlad was called Tepes, the Impaler, only after his death in 1476. Impalement was considered a particularly gruesome form of execution. The victim was stuck on a sharp stake, usually the width of a big burly man's arm. Vlad was said to have especially enjoyed mass executions, where several victims were impaled at once and their stakes hoisted upright. As they hung suspended above the ground, the weight of their bodies would slowly drag them down, causing the sharpened end of the stake to pierce their internal organs, causing a slow and painful death. To better enjoy these mass spectacles, Vlad routinely ordered a banquet table be set up in front of his victims. He'd enjoy a leisurely supper amid the pitiful sights and sounds of the dying. It's estimated that Vlad killed some 20,000 men, women, and children. The amount of people he killed varies from anywhere between 20,000 to 500,000. He showed no mercy and often tortured his enemies before killing them. At the same time that Vlad became notorious for his sadism, he was also respected by his subjects because of his fierce campaigns against the Turks. He was respected as a warrior and a stern ruler who tolerated no crime against his people, and during his reign built several monasteries. He was a hero that was worshipped and feared by his people. Maybe there was a bit more to Vlad's murderous, bloodthirsty habits than we first thought. In 1985, an Idaho physician, Dr. Thomas McDevitt, suggested that he may have suffered from a bizarre allergic reaction to blood. He claimed that in some allergic reactions to a given substance, sufferers also develop an addiction to that same substance. If deprived of it, they could react in a highly bizarre and deranged manner. Could Vlad just have been throwing a tantrum every time he craved blood? Portraits of the prince depict him with dark circles below his eyes, puffy cheeks, and a pasty, pallid complexion. These are classic characteristics of some types of allergy victims. There are various descriptions of the death of Dracula, the most popular being that he was killed in battle against the Turks near Bucharest in December 1476. It was also said that he was murdered by disloyal Wallachian boyars, just as he was about to overcome the Turks and send them packing. Other stories describe the Impaler falling in defeat, surrounded by rotting bodies of his loyal Moldavian troops. There's another account of Vlad accidentally being struck down at the moment of victory by one of his own men. What happened to Vlad's body? That's also surrounded by plenty of legends, none of which can be confirmed. The general thought amongst Vlad historians and experts is that the body of Vlad the Impaler was entombed near the altar in a Snagov monastery located on an island in the middle of a lake, accessible only by boat. It's well documented that his head was taken and put on display in Constantinople for all to see that the reign of this terrible man was truly over. In 1931 and 1932, archaeologist Dinu Rossetti, under orders from the Romanian Academy, visited the Snagov monastery in hope of discovering the body of Vlad Dracula. What he discovered was looted graves inside the monastery. Local legend told of how the body of Vlad Dracula lay one step in from the doorway of the monastery. Not believing this legend, he went to the worn-out and hammered tombstone in front of the altar. Rossetti found the grave beneath empty. He continued to dig and found a pre-Christian altar with bones of sacrificial animals. He decided to give the legend a go. He researched the floor in front of the entrance. He soon found an unmarked grave that wasn't looted and appeared to be that of a nobleman. He took photographs of everything in the tomb. The clothes on the body pointed to a rich man. A ring was later identified as a tournament ring of the kind given at Nuremberg. The skeleton, however, still had its head. As mentioned before, it's well documented that Vlad's head was severed and sent to Constantinople. Dinu Rossetti went forth and announced that he'd uncovered the remains of Vlad III Dracula. The leading historian of the time, Constantine Gurescu, dismissed these claims. Rossetti's claim isn't recognized as true. It's true that the monastery at Snegov suffers great humidity, and most of the remnants of bodies and skeletons in the monastery decomposed extremely quickly. Much that's been found was beyond recognition. If the body of Vlad were there, it probably decomposed and rotted into the ground before anyone could ever see it for themselves. To this day, there are certain legends of Vlad the Impaler that are commonly told around the world. Here are the most famous ones. The Golden Cup. Vlad was generally known as a fierce and honest leader. He was said to have been so confident that no thief would dare challenge him, knowing they'd be brutally killed, that he placed a golden cup on display in the central square of Târgoviște. The cup was never stolen and remained where it was, untouched throughout Vlad's reign. In another version of this story, he had a fountain in a far-off place with pure and cold water that travelers often visited to drink from. The gold cup was placed at the fountain for any who chose to drink from it. It also was never stolen and always returned to its place at the fountain. The foreign merchant. A foreign merchant from Hungary visited the capital of Târgoviște. Vlad ordered him to leave his wagon of gold in the street overnight. Obviously, this was to show off how his people wouldn't steal. The merchant was surprised to find 160 gold florins missing in the morning. Vlad then told the merchant, "Go now, and tonight you shall have your gold back." He put forward orders for his men to find the thief in the city. He also told them that if the burglar wasn't found, he'd throw one of the hugest tantrums anyone had ever seen and destroy the city. Dracula then put his own money in the wagon overnight, adding 1 florin to the original sum. The next morning, the merchant was astonished to find his florins returned with 1 extra. He went to Vlad and told of his findings. The thief had been found and brought to Vlad by then, and was impaled, probably while Vlad enjoyed his breakfast off to the side. He told the merchant, "Walk in peace now, but if you had not told me about that 1 florin, I would have had you impaled together with this thief." The visiting monks. The basics of this story are that 2 monks visited Vlad in his palace at Târgoviște. Vlad was curious to see the reactions of 2 monks regarding his impaling and atrocities. He led them to the rows of corpses in his courtyard and asked their opinions. One of the monks responded, saying, "You are appointed by God to punish evildoers." The other monk, obviously more horrified at what he saw, was honest and expressed himself truly, condemning Vlad for his actions. The German stories tell of Vlad impaling the second monk and rewarding the first. The Russian story tells of Vlad impaling the first for dishonesty and rewarding the second for his honesty. Whichever happened, you can be sure that Vlad, being the lover of impalement that he was, wouldn't have missed an opportunity like that. He probably impaled both just to have something to enjoy lunch by. The nailing of the hats. This is another story that has a few different versions. Foreign ambassadors were at Vlad's court at Târgoviște. They were granted an audience with the prince and refused to remove their hats. At the time, that was custom when in the presence of a prince in Wallachia. Vlad was angered. Instead of immediately impaling them, he had their hats nailed to their heads. That way, they could never remove them. Another version. The envoys were Turkish. They refused to remove their Phrygian caps. When asked why, they said, it was not the custom of their fathers to do so. Vlad ordered their hats be nailed to their heads with 3 nails so that they might never break such an excellent tradition. Vlad kept a mistress in the back streets of Târgoviște. The woman was madly in love with the prince and would do anything for him. One day, Vlad came to her, depressed. To cheer him up, she claimed to be pregnant with his child. She did this knowing full well how upset he got over dishonesty. Vlad warned her that she shouldn't joke over a matter so serious, but she stuck with her lie. Vlad then ordered her to be examined by the bath matrons to determine if she was telling the truth or not. He was soon informed of her lie. He then slit her open from her groin to her breasts, leaving her to die a slow, horrible death, wishing for his people to see what happens to a liar. Burning of unfortunate ones. Vlad got upset at the increase of cripples, beggars, the poor, and vagrants upon his land. He was very obsessive regarding that all worked and contributed equally. So he offered up a great feast in a great hall in Tyrgoviste, saying that no one should go hungry in his land. These unfortunate souls were the poor and crippled. They ate and drank late into the night when suddenly Vlad made an appearance. He asked them, "What else do you desire? Do you want to be without cares and lacking nothing in this world?" The crowd was fooled by his question and rose up and answered that they did indeed. Vlad then ordered the hall boarded up and set on fire. No one escaped. Vlad explained his actions, saying he did it in order that they represent no further burden to other men, so that no one will be poor in my realm. A story similar to the burning of the poor. Vlad gave the feast for his boyars and their family to celebrate Easter. Vlad was well aware that many of these were part of the conspiracy that led to his father's assassination and burying his elder brother Mircea alive. During the feast, Vlad asked his guests how many princes had ruled during their lifetimes. All the guests present had outlived several princes. One answered that at least 30 princes had held the throne during his life. Vlad immediately had all the assembled guests arrested on the spot. The older boyars and their families were immediately impaled. The younger ones and their families were marched north from Tyrgoviste to the ruins of a castle in the mountains above the Argus River. Being determined to rebuild this ancient fortress for his own, he forced the boyars to work for months rebuilding the old castle using materials from a nearby ruin. They were forced to continue when their clothes fell from their bodies, leaving them naked. Very few of these people survived the building of Castle Dracula. What to do with a lazy woman? Vlad pointed out a man working in the field who was wearing a short kaftan. The prince stopped and asked if the man had a wife. He replied, "Yes." Vlad ordered the wife be brought before him and asked her how she spent her days. The terrified woman answered that she spent her days washing, baking, and sewing. Vlad pointed out her husband's short kaftan as evidence of her laziness and dishonesty. He ordered the woman impaled, despite her husband's protest that he was well satisfied with his wife, and she certainly wasn't lazy. Vlad ordered another woman to marry the peasant, warning her to work hard, or she'd suffer the same fate. Ever hold your nose in front of Vlad? In 1459, on St. Bartholomew's Day, Vlad had 30,000 of the merchants and nobles of the Transylvanian city of Brasov impaled. In order to enjoy the entire experience, he commanded that his table be set up and that his boyars join him for a feast amongst the forest of impaled corpses. While dining, Vlad noticed one of his boyars was holding his nose, merely in an effort to try to avoid some of the putrid stench of blood and emptied bowels of the surrounding bodies. Vlad took it upon himself to impale the man higher than all the rest, so that he might be above the stench. Another version, a nobleman, an envoy of the Transylvanian cities of Brasov and Sibiu, was sent to appeal to Vlad to spare the cities. While hearing the man's appeals, Vlad took great enjoyment walking among the stakes with some of the impaled people still alive. The nobleman was almost overcome by the ordeal. Vlad asked him if he found the stench oppressive. The nobleman, seeing an opportunity to get on Vlad's side of things, responded that his only concern was for the health and welfare of the prince. Vlad was then angered at the nobleman's dishonesty and had him impaled once again high above the stench. Other interesting things about Vlad Dracula. Most are actual facts, but of course, some are simply myths. Vlad often had the stakes arranged in various geometric patterns. The most common pattern was a ring of concentric circles in the outskirts of the city that was his target. The height of the spear indicated the rank of the victim. The decaying corpses were often left up for months. It was once reported that an invading Turkish army turned back in fright when they encountered thousands of rotting corpses impaled on the banks of the Danube. He signed his name Dracula, or Draculi, the devil's son, a name which was distorted into Dracula. Some tell the story of how Vlad used the monastery as a prison where he tortured people in their cells. There have been discoveries of decapitated skeletons with their skulls placed alongside the pierced bodies. Dracula used various means of torturing, including cutting of limbs, blinding, strangulation, burning, cutting off noses and ears, mutilation of sexual organs, especially with women, scalping, skinning, exposure to the elements or to wild animals, and boiling alive. The Vatican still has some secret reports on Vlad sent to Pope Pius II in Rome. Vlad had some obsession with female chastity. Maidens who lost their virginity, adulterous wives, and unchaste were all targets of his cruelty. Women often had their sexual organs cut out and/or their breasts cut off. They were also impaled upon red-hot stakes through the groin coming out of their mouth. One unfaithful wife was executed by being skinned alive and impaled after having her breasts cut off in a square in Târgoviște. Her skin was placed beside her on a table. Vlad was said to have made a meal out of the enemy's flesh and to have drank their blood. Reportedly, his first wife committed suicide by leaping from the towers of Dracula's castle into the waters of the Arges River, rather than surrender to the Turks. In 1976, the Romanian government issued a commemorative stamp on the occasion of the 500th anniversary of Vlad's death. Bran Castle is one of the most famous Vlad sites. It has no significant connection with Dracula, however. All tourists are dragged there and think this is Dracula's castle. It looks the part, but the real Dracula castle is in ruins at Poenari, which is off the beaten track and draws only a few dedicated Dracula Vlad fans. Vlad Dracula may have simply stayed at Bran Castle a few times. He never owned the castle or lived in it. At one time, a Hungarian captain followed a thief into Vlad's house. When Vlad discovered the intruders, he killed the Hungarian officer rather than the thief. His reasons were that a gentleman does not enter the presence of a great ruler without an introduction. Had the captain followed proper protocol, he'd have lived rather than be impaled. While imprisoned at one time, Vlad couldn't help himself but torture small animals. One of the traits of a psychopath, should anyone need any more convincing that he was one. They were quite often found impaled upon small stakes. Gypsy legend says that Dracula returned to Earth 200 years after his death. They say he looked similar to his old self, but was less violent and fit in well with the times. They also say that he never died and carries his coffin around with him still to this day, like a vampire. The legend of this terrible ruler continues. He's been immortalized in film. The legend of Vlad the Impaler Dracula will never die. If you like creepy stories like these, please subscribe to the channel.